Welcome to Immortal Wisdom with Leon Denis. This is video 5 of a 15 short clip series on Leon Denis chapters of the 5th part of his book After Death, which was recently published by the United States Spiritist Council. We have been studying this because it helps us clarify doubts and gives us guidance towards goals to be achieved in our inner transformation, without which we cannot improve ourselves. Today is about chapter 46. Chapter 46 is about selfishness. It's a tough subject because we all have some form of selfishness at different levels, but we do have it. When Kardec in the Spirit's book asked, is it possible to get rid of it? And the Spirit say, get rid of it is hard, but we need to understand more about the spiritual side of life to really uproot ourselves of selfishness. So Leon Denis in this chapter begins by saying that selfishness is a companion of ego, pride. It's the soul's illness. So when we see selfishness, it has a tone of illness because it's creating obstacle in the flow of God's giving. We are part of it. When we retain what we're giving instead of sharing, we are actually creating some form of obstacle in the flow of life, and this is illness. It's not healthy. And it's an obstacle to social improvement, he says. Selfishness is a form of ferocious individualism. He compares humans who are truly selfish to unconscious animals, let's say this way. And he tells us the importance of creating a form of gratitude to society. He says, after God, we shall be thankful to society for living under the conditions that we are, because we don't create the life that we create by ourselves. Even if we are the wealthiest, we depend on those who work for us. So creating this gratitude, we will be raising ourselves above selfishness. Because we are interdependent, he says. We are interdependent. And he says we can measure our selfishness in a very peculiar way. And I'd like to read this part to you. He says, by our level of understanding of the social bonds, as well as of the law of solidarity, we can measure the amount of selfishness we shelter within us. So, it's like those psychological tests. In a scale from 0 to 10, how selfish are we? And it depends of two measures, Leon Denis says. It depends on how we understand of the social bonds, and he says, understanding of the law of solidarity. In the Spirit's book, Kardec talks about one of the laws of God being the law of society. Knowing that we belong to the social body and we are interdependent will prevent us from falling too deep into the traps of selfishness as well. So he says, those who are misers, too greedy, they have a form, as Leon Denis says, very interesting expression, a form of repulsive selfishness. It's the top of selfishness, right? So he says, in order to avoid miserliness and greediness, we need to find moderation. And he says the opposite, like wasting resources and money, is also not good. So he says moderation. And here we recall Ben Franklin, who was so wise, such a genius in all senses, a true missionary, because when he was only 20 years of age, he made a list of 13 virtues he wanted to acquire because he observed he was short on those virtues, and amongst them was moderation. So that's what we need to do. You see, Ben Franklin was very jovial. He never felt like I need to go and punish myself. No, he was like, okay, I understand. I have that shortcoming, but I'm gonna improve it. So he would create this list, go, to work, do his things, and when he got home, he would check mark. Did I make it? Didn't I make it? And keep on going. When we read his autobiography, we get to know more about his efforts. And remember, the definition of a true spiritist is making efforts. Those who make efforts to overcome their bad tendencies are true spiritists. So it's not about being perfect, it's about making effort. And who knows if you're making effort, if I'm making effort? Only we are to know, because it's an inner work. People cannot tell. So if they tell us, you're not a true spiritist, yeah, maybe not, but I'm making efforts. So we may be. It's funny, right? But guilt doesn't serve any purpose. And Leon Denis, in his wisdom, shares with us that the consequences of selfishness are very striking. He says people who are selfish, one day or another, will feel this inner void, loneliness. How many people feel this nowadays? And it would be easily medicated, remedied, if people were more fraternal, in greater solidarity to other people. And he says, those who cooperate socially, who obeys the laws of God, like the law of society, they don't get this feeling of loneliness and this inner void. So what is our role? And he explains to us to fight continuously in favor of the good and for the truth. He says even more. He says that those who are more selfish are often those who are wealthy. Why? Because they tend to have their hearts dried up by the easiness of life, and they forget about those who are suffering. So he recommends something worthwhile reading. Everything is worthwhile reading, but just for the sake of our summary here, on page 283, he says, may we never sit at an opulent table without thinking about who is starving. This thought will render us more sober and moderate in our tastes and appetites. Let us think about the millions of people struggling either in the heat of the summer or in the bad weather in order to extract from the soil at low wages all the products that supply our banquets and embellish our homes. Let us remember that in order to supply our houses with brilliant light and our stoves with salutary fire, some men, our fellow creatures capable to love and feel like us, work all their life below the ground, far away from the blue sky and the cheerful sun, piercing the billows of the planet with their picks. May we remember that in order to decorate our sitting rooms with mirrors and sparkling crystals, in order to produce the masses of objects that compose our well-being, other men, thousands of them, pass all their existence in the burning heat of blast furnaces, etc., etc. So he's telling us, recommending this practice. Before we sit down, how many of us now have Facebook, Instagram, etc.? And there we go. We're eating at a table. We don't care about if people are working hard and watching us. We're taking pictures of our plates and say, hey, here I am at my restaurant. What about those who are working hard, maybe friends of ours, and they are there having a hard time? Compassion. At a beach, hey, here I am at a beach. People are there working. Oh, but I don't mean that, I'm not saying we do mean to push that button, but we're all humans. What good are we doing to people when we're doing this? Creating envy, jealousy, pushing people's fragile buttons because we all have them. That's not charity. Selfishness. It is selfishness. I may travel, but the mentor say, Vanessa, that's not how you help people. By sharing this, but share the joy of good messages, of good thoughts, good feelings. The little enjoyments in your life, keep them to yourself. Keep them to yourself. And he says more here. Peace will come true when selfishness is defeated on the earth. We all know in the Gospel according to Spiritism that the planets have different categories of evolution, and planet Earth is in a transitory phase from trials and atonements to regeneration planet, and evil is still predominant on the earth, which means that we have a long way to conquer the predominance of good over evil on the earth. So selfishness is one of the illnesses we need to uproot. So he says, keep our minds firmly understanding that solidarity will prevail and that one day we will need to be reborn in a humbler position, inevitably. And that feeling, he says on page 284, and I'll read it because again, it's the poetry of Leon Denis' wisdom that makes us feel this scripture. As Jesus said once to Nicodemus, it's not about knowing, but feeling the scriptures. Leon Denis helps us to feel the guidelines, the guidance of the spirits. And he says, when we know that we'll need to be reborn in a humbler position, we work like spurs and repress selfishness. Faced with such perspective, the feeling of outrage arising from an inflated sentiment of personality will cool down, providing us with a more exact notion of our position and our role in the universe. Once we are aware that we are bonded to all the other souls and mutually responsible for their advancement and bliss, we will care more about their situation, their progress, and their trials. This feeling will spread over the world to such an extent that institutions and social relations will improve. And fraternity, this banner word which is on everyone's lips, will descend into the hearts and become reality. Then we will feel ourselves living in the others. We'll be delighted with their joys, and we will suffer with their sorrows. Then no more mourning shall go without echo, no more pain shall remain without consolation. Strong and peaceful and united, the great human family will march more swiftly towards their magnificent destiny. This is the perspective, the evolution. It's very joyful, very hopeful. Let us meditate, do Leon Denis exercise in our daily lives, and live a more life in solidarity.